Okay, we're gonna get started. You guys ready?
Yeah.
Nice. Good to see some old faces, some new faces here today. So today we're going over basically how do you make river decisions and kind of like I think we've been there all before where like somebody jams at us in the river and like we're like, oh shit, okay, I don't know what to do here. Do I call? Do I fold? So really this is kind of giving you a framework and like a checklist of things to go through so you can methodically go through like, okay, this in theory should be a call, and then you can take a second to kind of evaluate everything else in front of you and decide whether or not you will call or fold. But actually before I go to show you what are the questions that I go through and the things that I do with my coach, what are the questions, like what's your guys' process? What do you guys do when you're facing like a big river bet? How do you decide whether or not to call or fold? What do you guys think through? Yeah, or what do you guys, Matt?
I usually kind of decide that on the turn, like depending
Okay.
on what, like I know generally, okay, there's like, 60% of my chips in the pot on the turn, I'm calling a turn bet here.
Mm-hmm.
If I gotta be ready to call an on the river, and do I have the equity to
To do that,
make this call, because I also need to make another call.
right?
That's kind of how I think about it.
So usually, would you say like if you decide you're gonna call the turn, are you basically deciding that you're gonna call most
Yeah.
rivers?
Like maybe I have a high, like maybe I have top pair, and
Excuse me.
the board's kind of connected, but there's a lot of draws out there, and
Mhm.
villain is betting into me on the turn, and I'm making that call. I got to be ready if the board doesn't get any more dynamic. Like if a blank comes,
Right.
I'm gonna call that jam.
Got you.
If that happens,
Okay, so you sounds like you make your mind up like on the turn for the most part.
for the most part.
And that future planning is really good because you're generally on every street you kind of want to think about like what are the cards that come if you're on the flop, what are the cards that come on the turn or come on the river that are good for your range or bad for your range, and what are you going to do in those cases. So that is good. There should be some cards on the river that obviously affect your decision and make you start to think, well, okay, now do I want to change or shift direction? But yeah, okay, so like sounds like you'll make your mind up on the turn for the most part. Derek, you were gonna say something?
Yeah, it's just like, what's the story they're telling? Were they the pre-flop aggressor?
Mhm.
Have they been betting every street? Are they like betting like they're trying to get all their chips in? If I'm in position, so I guess in this place I am in position, they've jammed.
Yeah, I mean this is either. You could be out of position, you check, like let's say you check, flop, turn, and river, and they just bet every street, and then now you're deciding, oh shit, okay, do I call here on the river? Yeah, or they could be out of position and they just jammed into you. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, so you'll think about like, does their story make sense? Like, what do I think about this person? What's my read on them? Yeah, do I think they're gonna be over bluffing or any of these things? Cool. What else? Anything else you guys go through?
Maybe blocker, like for example, when the flush kind of get there, like if they're like still kind of the same suit and I have a blocker, maybe I'll consider more likely to call.
Yeah, blockers are very important when choosing what combos to call with. So if you have cards that block their value hands or you have cards that block their bluffs, that might drive you to want to do more calling or more folding. Yeah, that's a good one. Anything else?
Yeah, I do rely on the timing tells in the prior streets.
Timing tells, yeah.
In the prior streets especially.
Yeah.
And how the timing tells on even pre-flop. So I do kind of, actually that's the most important part. I do like go back and see how they behaved on each turn. And I do try, if the pot's getting massive, I do try to look where they're looking at their chips or not, and
Yeah.
are they ready to trying to build the pot, and are they eager to, not everyone's trying to hide their body language a lot.
Right.
So if they're very eager to just get it in there, irrespective of the card coming on the turn, I can already see that they're ready to like bump up the pot. So those things, I try to rely on that as well besides the theory.
Yeah. So it sounds like live tells, and then two, you kind of think back, which everyone should do, kind of like go back to the beginning of the hand and like every step and every move that they made to try to like narrow their range in and just see like, okay, does this line make sense? Do they have enough value hands here to be betting?
Correct.
Do they have any bluffs just based on the way the board ran out?
Yeah.
So that's super good. So these are the questions that I ask myself on basically every river decision. And I think you guys covered a bunch of them really, which is, I mean, first, like, what are the natural bluffs? Like, sometimes there'll be boards where they're just like, there are no natural bluffs. And in those cases, like, I just heavily lean towards fold, regardless of what hand I have. If it's just like, there are no natural bluffs, like, this is probably going to be a very under bluff spot. Like, do I think this guy is a maniac to pull like a random hand to bluff with? And if I don't, then like, I'm just going to be like over folding a ton. So what are the natural bluffs that the villain can arrive here with? And then just because there might be like 30 combos of bluffs, like, not everybody chooses to bluff with those hands at 100% frequency. So this is where we have to really think about our opponent and be like, do we think this is somebody who's going to choose these hands and at what frequency? Are they going to pick 75% of these bluff combos to bluff with, 50%, 100%, or 0? Because there's definitely people who just like don't bluff enough on the river. And so even if there's like all the bluffs available to them, all the flush draws, all the straight draws, just based on what we know about this person, maybe they just never bluff with them. And then what are their value hands? And so this is where we kind of like pay close attention to, especially the sizing when we think about going back and like maybe timing and all these other live tells that we might have. Like, what are the value hands that this person could have? Do we think that they're capable of going for a super thin value? Or are they betting a polarized range? And sizing will be pretty indicative of this. Obviously, if they're going for larger sizing, then it's going to generally be a more polarized range, which means they're going to have fewer value hands, but also fewer bluffs. Whereas if they're betting a smaller bet, let's say half pot on the river, then they're going to have a lot more value hands available to them. So we have to really think, okay, how thin value are they going to potentially be going for? And do I beat any value bets? And sometimes this question is enough, honestly, is like, if we beat some of their value bets, then I'm almost always calling. Like, we have trips on the river and they could be betting like top pair, top kicker for value here. Then I'm just going to call and not really think too much about these other questions if we beat some of their value bets. Do we have any relevant blockers? Does it reduce their bluff combos? Does it reduce their value combos? We have to think about this carefully. And then finally, like, what are my odds? So like, what's the actual price we're getting? I think this one was kind of missed, is like, what's the price I'm getting and how often do I need to be right? Because very often, in almost every case, like, we don't have to be right necessarily that often. Like, we don't have to be right like anywhere near close to the majority of the time for calls to be profitable on the river. So it's very important to know like how often we need to be right and how often we expect to be right given all this other information. So I'll give an example. Like, we're going to kind of walk right into an example of this from a hand I played. And like, I think generally, like, from a frequency standpoint, like, we don't face like large river bets from like a decision making standpoint in the game tree as often as like, okay, you're getting C bet on the flop. But the impact of these like situations is usually kind of like like defining like your entire like tournament. Either you're about to like make a call for like your entire tournament life, or you're trying, or like like for your entire tournament life, or like maybe like a chip lead pot or something like that, or like it's in a cash game and it's like for like piles. So that's why it becomes like incredibly important that we do go through the right thinking process, and this will also help ultimately like calm down all the emotions that come with it, as opposed to like, oh shit, this is my tournament life on the line. Because there's like all the classic like noise that goes through your head, and it goes through mine too, is like, oh, I would suck to bust here, and like, and at this, the first time I'm gonna go through, I think there were like 17 people left in a tournament with had maybe like, it was in the 2.2K high roller that I just played a few days ago. And so like, if I lost this pot, this was for like a chip lead pot. So it's like, okay, if I win this pot, like I have a really good like stack to be chip leading the final like 16 players and potentially win this whole thing. If I lose it, I'm not out of this tournament, but I'm knocked back down to maybe an average or below average stack. And like, I'm in like, cause right, basically I'm second in chips. This is first versus second in chips right now. So this is a very, very like consequential pot. And like that could be all that noise that just like pushes you to fold. It's like, oh, okay, I don't want to risk this much. But then when you actually go through this step, I'll kind of show you how I did that exactly like in game, and how it kind of like pulls me away from like all the noise that will enter your mind. So this is like set up the scenario in the actual hand. So I mentioned there's like 16 players left in the tournament at this point. Like there's like reasonable pay jumps at this point. I think every like maybe like every person or two that's busting, it's like a 1 or 2K pay jump. So Hijack opens. He's like chip leader in this entire tournament. I'm second in chips. Like he has maybe 100 big blinds and I have 80 big blinds. So we're the two biggest stacks in the entire tournament. I have position on him. I call in the cutoff with 8-9 of hearts. And it's worth noting first, like, this is either going to be a call or a 3-bet. I think generally, in theory, is going to be leaning more towards call, but especially with ICM, where like I'm not really incentivized to want to play like big pots with the chip leader. I could put a lot of pressure on like middling stacks, so like I'm gonna just like generally shift my strategy to be almost like a pure call with a hand like 8-9 of hearts against like a chip leader on my right. Yeah, so that's what happens pre-flop. Everyone else folds, and then the flop comes 8-3 ace. I flop middle pair. He bets small. I call on the flop. Another kind of exploit as well is that like recreational players in this exact formation. So this is actually a really, really good exploit for you guys to kind of know and understand is like late position versus late position. So like hijack versus cutoff, hijack versus button, cutoff versus button. When you opened and then you are out of position, so like I open in the cutoff and then button calls, I range check every single flop, meaning I check 100% of the time on every single flop. And this and actually generally in theory you're supposed to be checking most flops. Like in theory you're supposed to be checking like 70 to 80% of flops. I just adjust it to 100% check, and I find this like works really, really well in like recreational fields because one, like recreational players are kind of like over c-betting on a lot of flops. So like first, when I'm like this hijack player and I check, a lot of like bad players are just gonna think I never check an ace. So first, even though I'm like literally checking everything, I'm checking aces, ace king, ace queen, whatever. Like I'm checking all my strong hands, I'm checking my junky hands. So they're gonna over stab when they're in position and over bluff. And then conversely, when bad players are in this position, they don't understand the theory that they're actually supposed to be checking most of their range. And that's primarily driven because my range is actually supposed to be pretty strong, especially in this formation. Like I told you, I'm supposed to be 3-betting with even a hand like 8-9 of hearts sometimes, but I'm choosing to call with it. Like I'm even calling with like hands as good as like pocket 10s, sometimes even pocket jacks. So my range is actually quite strong, which is why he's supposed to be checking a lot. But this was kind of like a wild like rec player that I would be expecting to kind of be like betting actually a lot of these flops and not knowing the theory that he's supposed to be checking most of the time. But this is just like a general kind of exploit for you guys to know, and also to understand that like if you're playing against a good player in a tournament and they check to you like when it's like late position versus late position, it's usually like a range check, meaning they could still have a lot of good hands. So just be careful if you decide to start bluffing on the flop. Anyways, we're talking about rivers, but I want to make that quick tangent for you guys because I think it's really important, and it's like I just like steal a bunch of like value from people because like a lot of bad players just kind of like just never think I have an ace when I check to them on this flop. And then the turn goes, so like I call the flop bet, pretty standard. Turn comes like for the most part a blank. He bets big, I think 8.5 into like I don't know like 10 big blinds, and then I think also pretty standard like I just have a pretty standard call. I still have like second pair. And then on the river, he bets really big, like 23 bigs into 27.5. And so this is where I've got a decision. And I start to go through like my checklist, right? Like, okay, I've got like weak second pair. What are the value hands? Like, what are the bluffs he has available to them? What do we do? So we start going through our checklist. But before we go into, actually we'll walk through it step by step, which is like the very first thing is, what are the natural bluffs you guys think the villain has available to him?
Repping an ace.
Repping an ace, yes. He is repping it. Well, but also think, I mean, we'll get to this, which is like, what are his value hands, right? Like, do we think ace X is strong enough to bet 3 streets for value? We'll get to that in a second, but I want to start with his bluffs. But yeah, he's repping a good hand. But what are the actual bluffs that he will have?
He has flush draws.
Flush draws? Yep, he has flush draws.
Could he have hit a straight?
He could hit a straight, but he's not bluffing.
Oh.
But But the question is, are there any straight draws?
Yeah.
Does he have any straight? Does he have any missed straight draws in his range?
No.
What do you guys think?
Not really.
No. 5-6 suited makes a straight on the river. And 5-6 suited, I think, yeah, what most of you guys are gathering is like, he doesn't really have any straight draws because the only one that would make sense, like the lowest suited connector you should be opening with is 5-6 suited, and that one makes a straight on the river. Like, and he doesn't really have, like, he doesn't have like, I don't know, like 2x suited or like 5x suited that isn't 5-6 suited. Like he's not playing 5-7 suited, and 5-7 suited makes a pair, but like he's not playing like any other 5x or 2x really here that doesn't have a pair or makes a straight on the river. So basically he has no straight draws, so like his only bluff combos are flush draws. So intuitively, if you think about that, it's like, okay, maybe there's not that many bluff combos if he only has like flush draws available to him. But then this is where like we look at the chart and like what are all the suited hands he's supposed to be opening with? And I'll ask you guys, like how many flush bluff combos do you guys think there are? So how many flushes, like let's say the more obvious, like king queen suited, king queen of diamonds, queen jack of diamonds, but how many do you think he should have available in his range?
Maybe like 5 or 6.
5 or 6, okay.
Like king jack.
Yeah, like all the broadways, yeah, king jack, king 10, king queen, yeah. Anyone else think more? Anyone else think less?
When you count those, do you count like king queen of hearts, king queen of spades? Do you count like 1, 2, 3, 4? Like for all the suits, or do you just count like? I'm just asking like how you do the math. But he's like when you're saying 5, is that like king queen of all of the?
I was just thinking of diamonds.
But yeah, exactly, because we're only thinking diamonds here. Like he's not gonna turn a hand, or he shouldn't be like king queen of hearts into a bluff here. So we're only counting the diamond combos. So each one only counts as 1.
4, 5 of diamond. Is that
4, 5 of diamonds. So he shouldn't be opening. I'll show you the chart in a second, but he shouldn't be opening anything less than 5, 6 suited. So he shouldn't have 4, 5 suited in his range, but it's possible. Like a kind of like a looser player could have it. So yeah, we can add 4 or 5 diamonds.
can you have a smaller pocket, like 6s, 5s?
Yeah, yes, it's less natural. So I say those are bluffs that are available to him. But when I talk about like natural bluffs, it's like, okay, the draws that like bricked out and like I have king high or 10 high and now I just have to bluff. Whereas like 6s could be here and like 6s could be good enough for showdown, right? Where it's like I could be calling with a flush draw, like and just like, you know, calling 2 streets. So like he's beating all my missed draws. So he doesn't have to bluff with those hands. Yeah, so when I say natural bluffs, I'm talking more of like just like the bricked out draws. But yeah, so I heard like 4 to 5 combos is what you guys think, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's take a look at what his range should be and what he's opening with. So this is what his opening range should look like. So he's opening actually every suited combo of king X from king 5 to king queen, queen 7 to queen jack, and then he's got like I mentioned like the lowest like suited connector he's opening with is 5, 6 suited. So he shouldn't really have like any of these in there. But he's got like a decent amount of suited combinations. So he'll have the diamonds of all of these. And the short story is that this is a lot more than 5 combos of flush draws. It's closer to like, I think it's like 14, 15. If he chooses to bluff all of them. And then we have to ask our question is like, do we think he's going to bluff with these 100% of the time? So I'll just do the math for you guys, which is, yeah, it's 14 combos. Oops, I skipped ahead. So it's 14 combos of flush draws. So it's quite a significant amount of bluffs that he can choose. So I mentioned, yeah, king 5 to king queen, queen 7 to queen jack, jack 9 to jack 10, and then 10, 9 of diamonds. All the other suited connectors made a pair or something like that, or made a straight, and I just don't think that they're as natural bluffs because they could actually just be the best hand, and I'd probably expect him to check at some point as opposed to go bet, 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 especially a very big size here on the river. So these are kind of like 14 combos of natural bluffs that we think are available to him. So the next question then is what do we think are his value combos? And what do you guys think? What do you guys think are the hands that he would want to bet 3 streets here for value?
2 pairs.
2 pair, yeah? What are the 2 pairs that make sense?
Ace anything.
Ace 3, Ace 4 maybe.
Ace 3, Ace 4, yeah? Ace 3, Ace 4 suited, because he won't have the offsuit ones of
Yeah,
those.
even the diamond could be in there as well.
Ace king of diamonds, ace queen of diamonds.
Yeah, I mean ace king, ace queen, not even without the diamonds necessarily, but
Ace of diamonds with anything. Like ace of diamonds with 10 of hearts, something like that.
do you think that hand is gonna bet bet all 3 streets
No.
though?
Yeah.
So
On this
Yeah.
texture though, like maybe.
Even 7, 8.
it's possible, but it's thin. I would say like betting ace 10 for 3 streets on this board is quite thin, and most good players are not going to do it. Bad players, I mean, one of the main thing that bad players will do is they'll overplay their 1 pair hands and their marginal hands.
So ace 10 is usually like 2 streets of value then.
Yeah, like a pretty standard way to play. I mean, if I had ace 10, I would have checked. First, I would check flop. I would check call or check raise the flop. I would probably mix. Probably actually lean more towards check call. If I had like ace queen, ace king, maybe do more check raising. The turn, assuming he bet, or like let's say it went check check on the flop, I probably then bet turn and then I bet, and then I debate betting river. But honestly, I might just bet turn and I might just check on the river. So to me, like a hand like ace 10, ace jack, even ace queen is just like is going to be 1 to 2 streets of value on this board. Because again, his range is going to be super strong. He's going to flat me with ace queen. He's even going to flat me with ace king sometimes. He doesn't have to 3-bet like pure with ace king. He's going to have like, I mean, he's going to have like ace 8 suited sometimes. Or actually most of the time he's going to have ace 3 suited. So he's going to have 2 pairs. And if I'm him, like I also don't want to play like a massive pot with the guy who's second in chips and like risk losing a ton. Like I can't like necessarily apply like a ton of pressure to this person. So I want to be generally pretty cautious, especially out of position. So I would really say like with the exception of maybe, I don't say like maybe ace king because I don't think it does it pure. Like we're going to need 2 pair plus here to bet for value on 3 streets. Especially, and I think the main thing here is the sizing he chose on the river was really big. And I think that he's never doing that with just 1 pair. Or he shouldn't be. It's quite suicidal to be doing that with just 1 pair. Because I could definitely, especially when I've called, like he made a big bet on the turn too. So like I'm quite strong when I'm calling generally like on the turn on a big bet. So yeah, so we think it's like 2 pair plus, like the 2 pairs that make sense, like ace 8, ace 3, ace 4. I don't think ace 7 makes sense because ace 7 is going to be checking at some point. Like if it bet flop, it should check turn a ton, but maybe he decides to bet it sometimes. And then, do you guys think we have any relevant blockers?
Yeah, you block the 8, I guess.
That's all.
For like ace 8 suited.
Yeah, we blocked 8 for ace 8 suited.
Pocket 8s, I guess.
Exactly, and we block pocket 8s. So we have relevant blockers to his value combos. Do we have any relevant blockers to his bluff combos? Or do we unblock his bluff combos?
We unblock his bluff combos, I think, especially no flush, no diamonds.
Exactly. So we have like just at face value, we have a pretty decent hand to call with because we block a decent amount of his value combos and we unblock all of his bluff combos. So like, yeah, we don't block any of those diamond hands that we mentioned. And then, do I beat any of his value? I mean, basically we already addressed that like he should be only betting 2 pair plus here for value, so no. So we don't beat any of his value. Is everyone following so far? Any questions up until this point? We went through bluffs, we went through value. Good? Okay. So this is kind of what it looks like broken down. Like what are his value combos? So he has all the sets that like would have flop sets on the flop. I guess I realize I'm missing aces here as well. So he can of course have aces. So we add actually a couple more combos of aces that would bet flop, bet turn, bet river. So I guess it would be how many combos of aces? It would be another 3 combos. So this should be 8 combos. So for 24 total combos. The 2 pair, which are really only the ones that flop, basically 2 pairs. So ace 8, ace 4, ace 3, and then straights. So actually, did he have a straight draw on the flop? No, he didn't. So actually, it would only be very specifically 5, 6 of diamonds. So actually, instead of 4 combos, so actually me missing the aces actually nets out with this exactly. It should only be 1 combo of straights, which is 5, 6 of diamonds, and then you add 3 combos of aces. So it's still 21 combos. And yeah, like I mentioned, us holding the 8 is actually quite significant because we remove 2 combos of pocket 8s and we remove 4 combos of ace 8. So this actually reduces his value combos by 22%. Which is very significant mathematically, and then we unblock all of his bluffs and we don't beat any of his value. So the last step here, now that we know that he has 17, or what do you say, 14 bluff combos, and then we know that he has 21 value combos. Now we look at what's the price that we're getting. So how often do we need to be right? So what are my odds to call? So basically it's the bet size divided by the bet size plus the pot size. Is just the math for doing like pot odds and figure out how often we need to be right. So his bet size was, I think it was like 22, 23 and a half big blinds. So we're basically doing 23 and a half divided by, or 23 basically divided by 23 plus 53, which is the pot size. And basically the math that we get is we need to be right 31.3% of the time for this to be a profitable call. So is everyone following this step of just figuring out how often we need to be right? So then we look at the final step here is we need to compare this number, which is how often we need to be right, to how often we actually expect to be right based on how many bluff combos and value combos he has. And sorry, I was doing this quickly, so that should be 14. If I redo this math really quickly, or somebody can run this through me a calculator, which is 14 divided by 35. I think it should be like around like 40% or something like that.
Exactly 40%.
It's exactly 40%. Okay. So yeah, so we know we have to be right 31% of the time to be profitable. And then we know he has 14 bluff combos, he has 21 value combos, so we just do, if we call, we expect to win 14 out of 35 times. So 14 divided by 35 is 40%. 40% is higher than 31.3, so, and quite a lot higher than 31.3. So in theory, this should be a call every single time, and we expect this spot to be printing for us. We expect to be winning like and making a lot of EV by making this call. So that's all the theory part. And then we have to think about, okay, do we have any live reads? Are there any reasons why we think like anything else that we think we should like deviate from theory and maybe fold here? But does everyone follow kind of like the theory and this math up until this point? And I know like this, us walking through this took like about like 10-15 minutes, and in game you really only have like a couple minutes. Like I think I probably took maybe 2.5-3 minutes in game to like kind of like walk through these steps. Like I didn't like literally count every single combo, but I thought about, okay, if I think he's opening king 5 plus, queen 7 or queen 8 plus, like in that range, then I think in game I probably attributed like 12 flush combos in my head, and then I was just like counting the value combos. So I was counting all the 2-pair combos, all the sets, etc. And then I had like a very rough number in my mind that was like, okay, in theory, like this should be a call. And then you look at all like, and then this is where the soft skills of poker come in. So like this is all the hard and technical skills of poker where you're doing the math and the math tells you to call. And then you have to think about all the soft skills, which is, first off, he has 14 bluff combos, but do I think this villain is actually going to choose every single 14 of these and bluff them 100% of the time? And then do I have any other live reads or tells that make me want to deviate from theory? Like, is he like shaking, or is he like, does he look super comfortable? Is he like taking like a bunch of sips of water, like, and he's like kind of nervous? And then what are the consequences if we're wrong, right? Like, is this for our tournament life, or are there like is this a big ICM spot? Yes, Chloe.
Sorry, just going back. So for someone that's just starting out, like, is there a way to simplify this math? Like, if you were to give advice to someone, like, is there a way out?
Yeah, so I would take, yes, I would take some shortcuts. So it's like, once you've done some like pre-flop range studying, or like even if you just take like, okay, if I know he has flush draws as his like primary like bluffing combos, like, and just like assign like a number that is like, let's say you just choose like 12 combos. Like if I think he has flush draws, then I'm just gonna always assume it's like somewhere in the range of like 10 to 15 combos of flush draws, unless it's like an under the gun range that's gonna be super tight. For example, so like let's just say you take like 12, like, and maybe not necessarily count every single combo, and then you do still like, you still do want to be thinking about like what are the value combos, right? And like generally speaking, like for every set combo, there's going to be 3. For every 2 pair, you're taking like, it's usually going to be like 9. But I would say like just simplify and like kind of be like, okay, is it like sets plus like sets straights, and how many roughly do I think there are? Do some simplification on the number of combos and just compare, and then I would say the pot odds, you definitely want to get that math right. And I would say the best thing that ultimately helps with this is that like you do a lot of practice off the table. Like sometimes I'll spend like a couple hours on a single spot and like go through the math and like count every single combo, double check the combos, like run it through with a couple people. Do I think he has any other bluff combos here? And then that will help make it come a lot more intuitive in game. But I would say like ultimately the goal is like you can go through this process. But I would say like if you're really just starting out, I would honestly just focus on like sometimes like people who are just starting out, they don't ask any of these questions. Like this is a lot of questions to go through in the span of a couple minutes. So like start with like 1 or 2, right? Like first start with, like, I mentioned like if you just ask yourself, do I beat any value bets? And if the answer is yes, you should probably call. So start there. If you're not asking yourself this question, start that as step 1. Ask yourself that question. If you beat any value bets, you should just always call. And then just start thinking about like what are the bluffs, and what are the value combos. Like, don't even think about like pot odds yet if it's like too many things to think about, but you should be thinking about like what are the bluffs, and try to think of some bluffs. You don't even have to count combos. Just try to think, does he have bluffs? Or is this a board that there's no flush draws, there's no straight draws, I can't even think of a bluff? Just fold, right? And then you're here at VClub, you can also ask people. I think most people will be kind of friendly and be like, okay, I'll show you what I actually had. And then you can use that data and then use that for your studying. But I would just say like pick a couple of these questions that feel like comfortable to you, and I'll kind of go. This isn't necessarily in the order of priority, but I would start with like, do I beat any value bets? Always think about what are their bluff combos, what are their value combos, and then try to like make an intuitive guess of, do I think there's enough bluff combos here for me to call? And then do the math off the table. Write down the hand history, do all the math off the table, and then see if you were correct. And it's okay if you're wrong, because I got it wrong many times before. Like I've been in a lot of river spots where I had to do this thinking a lot. So now it becomes a lot more intuitive. But try to pick a couple questions, go through it, and then eventually, ideally, you want to be able to go through all these questions.
Okay. So what kind of hand beat value bets here? So for example, you have a two pair yourself?
Yeah, if I had a set, for example, if I had two pair, if I had ace 8, so is he going to value bet ace 3, ace 4 for value here? Yeah. So if I beat some of his value bets, then I just call with ace 8 and probably don't think too much about it.
What if I have the lowest two pair?
Yeah, if I have the lowest two pair, then I think about, okay, how often do I think he bets with ace king for value? And I think that like most decent players probably wouldn't bet 3 streets for value. And so like, yeah, I would just say like, okay, I don't think I really beat any value bets, so I would just move on to the rest of my process.
Okay.
Yeah. Good questions. Any other questions? So I think we were here. So we're here now on the soft skills component, which is like, do we think villain chooses to bluff with all those available to him? And I'll just kind of like tell you what was going through my head as I was going through this. So namely, like, this guy was a very active chip leader. So like basically I just assigned like based on this, and I just moved to tables. I didn't really have much information, but just seeing how he was like playing a lot of pots, he was getting after it. Like, I just assigned him 100% of bluff combos because I just based on how his chip stack and like how he was navigating. Otherwise, I didn't have any other live reads, so there's nothing else like pushing me to deviate from theory. And then the consequences in this specific situation were not that dire, basically, because if we're wrong, I think actually, so in this specific case, I would still have had an above average stack. I would have lost maybe like 40% of my stack, 50%, but I was second in chips, so I still probably would have been maybe like 10th in chips after that. And there were a lot of bad players after this tournament that I felt like I could just get a bunch of chips like in other pots in case I were wrong. So the consequences weren't that dire. I wasn't really that concerned about trying to make a 1 or 2K pay jump. Like I'm playing for first when I'm playing in these. So so based on all these like soft skill aspects, like nothing really pushed me to deviate from the theoretical side, which is like to click call. So in this specific case, I did call. He had Jack 10 of diamonds, and then basically from that we scooped the chip lead pot, and so we had a massive chip lead, kind of like going into the final like 16 players. Yeah. So that's hand number 1. Any questions about hand number 1?
No.
Cool. Okay, I think we'll have time for a second hand, which I didn't have time to write out like everything the same way, but at least I have the hand here, and then we can kind of like verbally go through those same questions. But in this hand, so this now we're at the final table. I think we're like 5 or 6 players remaining. I open with ace 10 off. I have the ace of clubs, so we're 6-handed. Sorry, 6-handed, and I open from the hijack. We get called in the small blind and the big blind. Both of them have about 25 bigs. Flop goes. They both check. It's worth noting that like I'm supposed to be checking on this flop a lot, especially for chips, like chip EV. But because of ICM, is anyone here unfamiliar with ICM? I'm guessing maybe, or everyone.
What's the full name?
Independent chip model, but basically ICM just applies in tournaments where it's kind of like a model for determining like how valuable your chips are. But basically it pushes people towards playing, like, especially middling stacks, like playing tighter and like playing tighter ranges, because the consequences of losing chips deep in tournaments is much higher than the value of gaining chips, because in tournaments you can just fold and make money, right? Like you could just fold and other people will bust and you make money, especially deep when you're at the 6-handed final table. I think the next pay jump is like maybe 5 to 10K or something like that. Maybe not 10K, but like 5K. So like they don't have a lot of incentive to want to play pots with bad hands, especially when in a final table with really high ICM implications. So because of that, like normally I would be checking a lot on this flop because the big blind especially is going to have a lot of 6x in the range, like 6-4 off, 6-5 off, 6-7 off, 6-8 off, 6-9 off. But because there's high ICM in this spot, they're going to be folding a lot of those hands. Like I wouldn't expect them to call with 6-4, 6-9. Like maybe they're still calling like the one gappers. So there's a lot of 6x removed from their range. Yeah, that's the main reason why I decide to c-bet this flop that I normally wouldn't. And because of the multi-wayness as well, like wanting to kind of like thin the field. So I do decide to go for like a small c-bet. Small blind folds, big blind calls. Turn goes check. I flop or I turn like top pair, top kicker on the turn. At this point, like I think one of his most natural hands to call me on the flop are like 8x type hands, straight draws. There's no flush draws really on the flop. So I'm, and then maybe he has like some pocket pair. So at this point, I'm like, my hand will probably mix between checking or betting this turn. I think probably in theory it's going to be doing more checking because I already kind of took this bet line on the flop. But honestly, I was like playing pretty aggressive and like getting after it, and I was bluffing a ton. So I felt like I could go for thinner value. So I do end up betting the turn. He calls, and then the river's a jack, and he bets like 60% pot into us. And so now we're at this decision and question of like, what do we do? So I guess I'll ask you guys first, which is like, what do we think are going through our steps is like, well, actually, we'll start with like, what do we think we beat any of his like value hands? Anything that we bet for value? We don't think so. Yeah, I would agree. Like, I don't think he's gonna turn a hand like 8-9 or something into like a value that he thinks is good enough to bet for value here, or like a weaker 10 or something like Queen 10, King 10. I don't. He's not really gonna have actually much Queen 10, King 10 at all. All those are four in the flop, or like pocket sevens. Like, yeah, we don't think we beat any value here. What do we think are his natural bluffs?
Club draw.
Yeah, he's got club draws. So like maybe he had a hand like, I mean, yeah, maybe he had a hand like 7-8 with like clubs. Like, so it had pair plus like flush draw, and for some reason he decides to turn it into like a bluff on the river. To be honest, I don't feel like it's a supernatural one if he had a pair. Like maybe it's 5-7 of clubs. Exactly. Like 5-7 of clubs. What other club draws does he have here?
8-9.
Yeah, 8-9 of clubs. I mean, he could float the flop, and he should be with hands like Ace-7 of clubs, Ace-9 of clubs, Ace-5 of clubs. Yeah. Oh, actually, sorry, this is a really important detail. I actually have the Ace of clubs in my hand. So that's the Ace of clubs, not the Ace of spades. So I actually block a lot of his like Ace-9, Ace-7 type hands. So immediately we know we kind of like block a lot of his bluffs. And like it's almost like in game, like I was almost thinking like, okay, like 5-7 of clubs, like was kind of like one of the only like bluff combos. Like 9-7 got there on the turn. Maybe he had like Queen 9 of clubs. I guess he has as well. Yeah, I mean Queen Jack of clubs like turns into a pair. Like a lot of those hands like kind of pair up as well. Like if he called with 9-10 of clubs on the flop, which makes sense, but then he pairs up on the turn, or 9 Jack of clubs. Like, so a lot of those kind of like 2-over cards that had backdoor straight, backdoor flush draws, like pair up here. So intuitively, like without even counting the combos, like there's not that many bluffs available for him to choose from. Whereas, what do we think about his value combos?
6-7.
6, yeah, like any 6x, and we mentioned like a bunch of the 6x that he would have. Like 6-5, Ace-6, 6-7, because he called up the big blind especially. So he is going to have offsuit combinations of 6-7, a decent amount. What did you say?
9-7 suited.
Yeah, 9-7. Not even just suit. Like, I mean, yeah, he's even probably calling with a lot of the 9-7 off kind of hands.
On big blind, yes.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to like. Good players are going to be playing a lot tighter. They're going to be folding a lot of offsuit cards from the big blind, especially multi-way. So this is the thing in tournaments as well as like multi-way. Like you want to be folding more and playing tighter as opposed to playing loose. So like good players would probably just like actually fold. Maybe not 9-7 off, but like yeah, some of these like offsuit one gappers they would fold.
10 jack sometimes, very rarely because we have a blocker.
Yeah, 10 jack exists, but yes, we have a blocker. That's right. I think sometimes, but like I could have like, I mean, I guess I have like ace jack sometimes with, well, ace jack of clubs specifically. But yeah, it could be 10 jack. He's got obviously so he's got straights. He's got full houses too, right? He's got straights, full houses. He's got trips. He's got some two pairs. So like we're just counting the classes of hands, and there's like kind of a lot of value combos there. So like this is where like we don't even have to do the math, and just like intuitively there's a lot of types of value hands, and there's very few bluff combos. So we won't even go through the theory, but I can tell you that like in theory this is a fold. In theory this is a fold, especially because we have the ace of clubs. We block a lot of his bluffs, and then and this is kind of like what I thought in game. I'll tell you in game I made this call because this is where I went to like the soft skills aspect, and like this was like. It's a very weird line first off, because like a lot of 6x, a lot of full houses and stuff like that are gonna generally want to like check raise us at some point. And then especially when he doesn't go all in on the river,
Yeah,
like
he's
left like 5 or
four
6
bigs.
big blinds behind for him.
4.5.
So it's like, why would you not go all in if you have a full house and try to like maximize value? Especially when the pot is already, I think the pot is like almost 20 bigs at this point. So his all in on the river is actually a pretty normal sizing. Like it would have been an 18 bigs into 20 bigs, not even full pot. So like it was a very weird line, even though like in theory like he shouldn't have a lot of bluffs, but like I subtracted some of his value combos because I feel like a decent number of his 6x, his straights, his full houses would have check raised me on the flop or the turn. Yeah, so I subtracted some value combos, but still like the only bluff combo I really kind of like purely attributed to him was like 5-7 clubs. So I still couldn't find enough bluffs to like really justify a call. And then the only other thing was like I ended up, or he ended up calling clock on me, on my decision. I was like 3 minutes in, and this led me down, like you can kind of like level yourself a bunch, but like I had called clock on somebody else when I was like bluffing, and I think he saw that, and then the guy ended up calling, and then I got into my head where it's like, first I didn't think this was like a good player. It was like a pretty bad like recreational player. It took a weird line, and usually when somebody does something weird, like I tend to get like very curious and like want to call and be like, okay, usually something's weird. Maybe they're just like coming up with some bluff combos that don't even make any sense. And then because he called the clock, that kind of like led me towards thinking like, okay, he just wants this hand to end and he wants me to fold. So those kind of things led me to call in the end. I ended up being wrong. He had Jack 6 for a full house, and this is a pretty pivotal hand. And like first off, like Jack 6 off is not supposed to be calling pre-flop. So like Jack 6 off should be folding here like most of the time. Like so like he is calling too wide pre-flop, and yeah, he kind of got like a ton of value out of me. I mean, like honestly, if he jammed, I would have been very tempted to call here on the river. In theory, I wouldn't have been, but like for the same reasons, I might have still called, and he would have made more money. But this ended up being a really pivotal hand because I was a chip leader like with 6 left, and then I lost like I lost like maybe 50% of my stack at this point. I was like then third in chips, and then I ended up this guy ended up winning the tournament. So like it goes to show like, okay, if I don't call this hand, I don't lose on this river spot. Maybe the whole tournament goes differently, and I end up winning the tournament for 105 grand instead of placing in third for 45, which is why these spots are really important. And like I kind of like got caught up in the soft skills element of it, and like went with what I thought was like a decent live read, which ended up being wrong. Even though like the theory strongly pushed me to be like, this is a fold. So yeah, one example where like I got it right, and then one example where I kind of like blundered and like maybe lost like 50k, 60k of value because of this like fuck up. But yeah, that was the second hand. Any questions about this one?
Yeah, about the flop, shouldn't we be betting big based on the qualities of the flop?
Yes, yeah. So like the sizing on this, if we are gonna bet, we should be betting big more often. notably with heavy ICM, like you don't have to go as big. Like a normal big sizing for chips would have been maybe something like 80%, 75 to 80% pot. In ICM, you can go maybe like 50% pot and it has the same effect as a big bet. Either way, I went like 33% pot or less, which is, or no, I think a little, I went like 38% pot or 40% pot, which is too small. So yeah, like that's kind of like a mistake in theory. Yeah, that's a mistake in theory as well.
So would you say that if you bet flop slightly higher, then you would be able to take more of their bluff combos out for the river if it ever gets to the river?
I think he doesn't have a lot of bluff combos either way here,
Right.
and this was kind of like I think when I navigate spots that I'm not familiar with, like a lot of time I'm kind of like range checking on this kind of board, and I'm deciding to deviate because of like the ICM implications.
Right.
I tend to take a slightly more, and I don't think this is necessarily a good habit, but I tend to take like a slightly more like passive or like more familiar route, which is like I'm familiar with like betting small on like flops and like managing the pot size. Whereas even though I know like there should be like a larger sizing, like I just haven't like studied that as much, especially in ICM. Like, and I don't know like when I like reduce the SPR by a bunch, and then on some turns I have to decide if I'm gonna jam or check. Like I have to have like more like varied sizings. Whereas if I go for the small, I kind of still have 3 streets available to me to go like small, big on turn, and then big on river. So it's more a function of like I just haven't studied this spot a ton, especially ICM. I haven't done a lot of ICM study, so I was choosing to go with a more familiar sizing. But in theory, it is a mistake, and should probably be picking a bigger sizing here. But it doesn't really impact the bluff combos because even for the small sizing, he doesn't have a lot of bluffs. Like we found 5-7 of clubs, but not really much else, right? Like maybe like there's a couple other flush, like maybe there's like 3-4 other like flush combos that might make sense here. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions about this one?
What was your stack size at the beginning of this?
I think I had like 50 bigs, something around that. I lost like 20 in this hand.
Because I have a feeling that if you probably had 30 bigs, maybe you don't make the call.
That yeah, I think that's part of it as well as like the consequences again, like of being wrong here. Like it wasn't like a massive chunk of my stack because I was chip leading, but this comes back to ICM where like 12 and a half bigs is still quite consequential, and again could have made the difference at the entire tournament if I didn't lose this amount. So even though like the percentage wise of my stack is not that much, because of ICM it's extremely valuable, like those 12 and a half bigs. Yeah, which maybe pushed me more towards calling, which I think is a mistake. Like if I were to replay this, like without knowing what he had, like I think the theory so strongly wants to push you towards folding that like I would have to be like so confident in like a live read to want to call, and like I wasn't that. I was like maybe a 50-50 on my live read, and I just went with it because I was just like I'm kind of like a calling station sometimes. So like, and that was like my downfall here. But yeah.
I have a question. Why do you bet turn instead of check?
Yeah, I mentioned it's good. It's probably going to be mixing and like probably going to be checking a lot on turn. And for me, because I was chip leading, I was like playing like 70-80% of pots at this point, and like navigating pretty comfortable on the final table. And because I'm bluffing a lot and I'd been called down in bluffs, I have to like counter that or like exploit this image where I'm bluffing a lot by also going for thin value. So that's why in this spot where I know I'm supposed to be checking a decent amount in theory, but because of the dynamics of the final table, I chose to bet here to go for thin value against like an 8x or like a pocket pair, because I just think they're gonna overassign a ton of bluffs to me, which I was having a lot of bluffs. So that's why I decided to bet on this turn. And actually, if he checked to me on the river, I was actually contemplating jamming on the river, like just to exactly target like an 8x, which obviously would have been suicidal here. Like he would have made more money if he checked, because I was probably betting, which would have been like kind of too thin. Yeah. Okay. If no other questions, we can wrap this one. But hopefully this was helpful, and will help you guys apply in the tournament today. But all right. That's it.
Thanks, sir.
Yeah. No problem.
Thank you.